Black Mirror is such a fascinating show to talk about. The 2011 anthology series follows various settings and genres, in which technology is often the gateway to stories about human nature. I got into the series around the release of Season 6, and God is it entertaining. It has its ups and it has its downs, but the reason the show fascinates me so much is because no matter what the episode, I almost always have a lot to think and talk about with the ideas they come up with. So, when Season 7 dropped, I sat down and watched all of it as soon as I could. And, in typical Black Mirror fashion, I have things to talk about. And I have a somewhat functioning YouTube channel now, so you all get to hear about it. So, buckle up, because I'm going to be ranking all 6 episodes of this season, from my least favorite to my favorite. Before we get started, I do have to give a little disclaimer. Due to the anthology aspect of Black Mirror, the episodes differ a lot in tone and in genre. This means that I feel like subjectivity plays a much bigger role when ranking these episodes as it would in most shows, because people are generally going to be more drawn to those genres and tones that they enjoy. So, while I do try to be objective, you are gonna have to put up with a little bit of my guilty pleasures along the way. Okay? Okay, let's go. Oh, and spoilers ahead for all of the episodes. Now, without further ado... Plaything is the only episode of the season that I can say I kind of have a negative opinion about. It follows Cameron, an anxiety-ridden, antisocial loner, as he forms a deeper and deeper obsession with these little creatures from a video game called Throngs. But things take a turn for the worst when he ends up committing a murder after his drug dealer decides to go on a Throng killing spree. So think of it like if someone got really, really attached to their Tamagotchis. Don't get me wrong, I didn't think this episode was, awful or anything. The performances were all great, and it was neat seeing that guy from Bandersnatch show up again. I also thought the premise was interesting enough. These little creatures that completely took over this guy's life, and who he thought were sentient as they communicated whenever he was having an acid trip. This is all good stuff, but then we kinda get to the problems. Firstly, this cop, while not exactly being an unrealistic depiction of an angry, aggressive police officer, was a little too over the top for me. Especially when I didn't feel he had much of an established reason to be this aggressive about identifying the murder victim. The episode is also a decently slow burn. The pacing isn't bad by any means, but you really get the sense that it's building up to something big. And it technically is, with the reveal that the Throngs are going to use a signal to basically turn humanity into a hive mind so that they can coexist with us. And there's definitely some room for interpretation as to what actually happens after that signal goes off. If everyone's actually dead, or if not, what the signal actually did. I kind of think it would have been stronger if the episode ended right before the signal was about to go off, or before everybody collapsed. Like, the beeping grows really quick and then we get a black screen as the signal plays, or just an ominous shot of Cameron smiling. That would leave it more open-ended if the signal was actually real, or if this whole thing was born out of Cameron's delusion. That his lack of social connection with humans and his drug use has genuinely convinced him that these little creatures are sentient. As is, I felt the ending was sort of anticlimactic and didn't quite deliver on what the episode seemed to be building to. The murder at the 2/3 mark was definitely the high point for me. So, while I don't think this was a bad episode, I did have the most noticeable issues with it compared to the others in the season, hence why I'm putting it at the bottom of my list. Bête Noire was definitely an episode. I hesitate to call it a fun one, given how much of it is just this woman's steady descent into madness, but the way it ends definitely leans into the sheer insanity and potential that the premise provides. Maria, a food researcher, has her world literally shifted when a former classmate, whom she used to bully, has come back for revenge. Using her computer skills, Verity found a way to jump between alternate timelines, successfully able to bend reality to her will to ruin her former bully's life. There's this interesting contrast, because while what's happening to Maria is terrible, it's also pretty clear she isn't a great person. She was a bully, and what she did to Verity was downright awful. You can definitely understand why Verity decided to use her newfound god powers to get revenge. The whole thing is played pretty tame for Black Mirror standards until the end, but that's kind of what makes it so horrifying. Like, in this impossible situation, I understand why someone would be driven to end their life if they were constantly gaslit and tormented by an ever-changing reality where they were the only one who remembered things as they used to be. I did really enjoy the ending, but the rest of the episode was pretty standard until that pickup. That's not a bad thing, I enjoyed it, but there wasn't much here that really had me hooked either. All in all, a fun ride, but not one that has me particularly jumping to revisit it anytime soon either. Two words. Doomed Yuri. Okay, the actual plot of Hotel Reverie is about an actress named Brandy Friday, who gets cast in a remake of this old romance film from the 1940s. However, things don't quite go according to script, and some flukes in the technology make the stakes far higher than she signed up for. Off the bat, this is such a fun premise. The idea of being stuck in a movie and having to stick to the script to get out alive is brilliant, but I sort of wish they'd done more with it. I feel like the romance story was battling with this concept for space, when I feel like they could have complemented each other instead. I would have liked to see them fumble all the way through this movie, the AI slowly falling in love and realizing the truth about her nature, instead of it all happening at once when the film unexpectedly shuts down. On the positive side again, though, the episode looks amazing. As someone with a soft spot for this era and style of movie, I loved seeing the scenes they shot inside the virtual world. I think the idea that Dorothy was a closeted lesbian and the social stigma of the time drove her to her death was a heartbreaking tragedy, and it's really bittersweet that her AI counterpart was able to experience that kind of love she wanted, if only for a short while. But I do feel there were some wonky parts. Firstly, some of the logic felt clunky. Definitely some contrivances, like Brandy not having a management team show up, only having the space for a couple of hours, the briefing USB just happening to fall out of the package, and the tech failures. I wouldn't go so far as to call them plot holes or immersion breaking, but I noticed them here more than I did in other episodes. I also kind of struggled with the way the romance was executed. I get what they were going for, but it just didn't quite land for me, at least in the way they went about it. I didn't feel like there was enough time spent with Brandy and Clara to convince me of their devotion to each other. Sure, we see a montage of it and are told they spent a very long time in the paused simulation together, but that's not the same thing as actually seeing them interact and fall for each other, which I feel like should have been a bigger focus of the episode if they wanted it to be more impactful. They're trying to juggle a lot of plot lines in this episode. Brandy wanting to break out on her own, Clara and Dorothy's feelings, trying to keep the movie on track, the AI realizing it's all a simulation of a film, etc., etc. I think if they cut some of that out and really focused on the premise of keeping the movie going while these two fall in love despite the off-script shenanigans, it would have been a lot tighter of a story. But that's just my opinion. What we have is still decently effective at what it's trying to do, even if I think the execution stumbled in a few places. And the aesthetic and moments where they did capitalize on the premise were enough to put this episode above the other entries so far on the list. Common People is the first episode of the season, and you know what? It's a pretty good one. It follows married couple Amanda and Mike after a tragic medical emergency requires Amanda's brain to be connected to a digital cloud service. Since it's a subscription-based model, and the episode is about how exploitative and greedy these sorts of companies and models can be, you can probably guess exactly where this plot is going to go. So, yeah, it's a pretty predictable storyline, but that doesn't bother me too much if it's well executed, and I'd say Common People does it pretty damn well. The best way I can describe the episode is an exercise in misery. You just have to watch this poor couple suffer more and more, knowing things are just gonna keep getting worse. But at the same time, you see how much they love each other and really feel for the tragedy they're going through. This felt like a more classic Black Mirror episode, and I mean that in a good way. The ending is just as bleak as you'd expect, but the way she was still saying the advertisements while muffled under the pillow was probably the most chilling moment in the entire season for me. It was a pretty strong start for Season 7, and I think the fact I'm only going to be able to rewatch this one when I'm emotionally prepared enough for that much misery says a lot about how effective it is in its bleakness. Eulogy was the biggest surprise of the season for me. Based on just the synopsis of each episode, this one had me the least interested. The idea of going into photos to revisit old memories wasn't a bad one per se, but it seemed less interesting or creative than all of the others. So yeah, I definitely wasn't expecting this absolute tearjerker of an episode instead. It follows Philip as he's guided through memories of his recently deceased ex-girlfriend, Carol, whose face he can't even remember. You start off thinking he's a victim with how he talks about her, but as the truth comes out, you realize he was far more at fault for their relationship falling apart than he initially presented. This is the lowest stakes episode of the season. No one's life is at risk, it's just a simple story about two people who used to love each other and how it all fell apart. But it's so effective in doing that yeah, I was a little misty-eyed by the end. I don't have much to say about the plot. It's fairly simple and self-explanatory. I just think it needs to be experienced. It's such a human story, which I feel like is at the core of the best Black Mirror episodes. Even if the technology wasn't really the focus, the emotional journey this episode takes us on was more than enough compensation. Alright, you know how I said at the start of the video there would be some subjectivity factored into this list? This is an example. Because, in my opinion, Eulogy is objectively a better episode than USS Callister Into Infinity. But, god damn it, I had so much fun with this episode that I had to give it my top spot. I'm a huge fan of the original USS Callister. So, when I heard that not only would this season feature Black Mirror's first ever sequel episode, but it would be to one of my favorites of the show, I was cautiously excited. This show has its ups and downs, and I wasn't sure how it would handle something like this. But I'm happy to report it was indeed a blast. I don't think Into Infinity is quite as strong as the first installment. There's definitely some contrivances, and it's cartoony and a bit over the top at points, but that's kinda what I love about it, and what I loved about the first installment too. The sheer entertainment I got out of it was such a fun ride, and the jokes here were by far the best in the season. I laughed out loud more than once. I know some people have issues with how happy the ending to this, or even the first USS Callister was, but given the tone of these episodes, I think it's more appropriate than a super downer ending would have been. I was hoping for more of what I loved about the first USS Callister. A funny, entertaining sci-fi adventure with just enough heart to make me want to see these characters make it out okay. And that's exactly what it delivered. Enough that I can overlook those slight stumbles and confidently say that this is definitely the episode I would want to come back to the most in the entire season, for a fun, dramatic, and immensely entertaining space fantasy. And that's my ranking of every episode in Season 7. I'm not sure if people are interested in it, but if so, maybe I could rank the other seasons too. If that's something you'd like to see, let me know in a comment. Also, let me know your ranking of the season. It's so recent that I haven't been able to tell what the general consensus is yet, so I'd love to hear what y'all thought. But for now, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.